So, if you're looking for, a light, breezy chat about the stock market or how to optimize your portfolio for the next quarter, you might want to adjust your expectations right now.
Just a little bit.
Seriously, if you're on a treadmill, maybe slow it down a notch because today we are not skimming the surface. We are taking a shortcut straight into the heavy stuff.
Yeah, we are.
We are cracking open one of the most intellectually dense, but honestly one of the most socially resonant sections of economic theory ever written.
It is heavy, but it's also incredibly illuminating. We're looking at Karl Marx's Capital, specifically Volume 1, Chapter 14, and we're really going to zoom in on parts 4 and 5.
And just to set the stage here, our mission today isn't to talk about economics in the way we usually hear it on the news. We aren't talking about prices, inflation, supply chains, or interest rates.
No, not at all.
This is what I'd call a social autopsy.
That is a perfect way to put it. It's an autopsy of the manufacturing system itself. Marx isn't just crunching numbers here. He's looking at the pathology of the industrial system.
Pathology, like a disease.
Exactly. He's diagnosing what happens to the human being when they're inserted into this massive grinding machine. He's asking a really fundamental question. What does the pursuit of absolute efficiency do to the human soul?
And I have to say, reading through these sources, the tone is, well, it's intense. Usually we look for those fun, counterintuitive facts. Did you know the first computer was a loom? That sort of thing. But today, the material is serious. It is critical. At times, it's actually quite dark.
It is.
Marx is painting a picture of a system that is efficient, yes, but efficient at a terrible cost.
Exactly. The core conflict we're going to explore is the transformation of the worker. We're moving from the idea of the independent craftsman, someone who knows a trade, who creates a whole product, who has a real relationship with their work.
Right, someone with pride in what they make.
To what Marx calls a detail labor mechanism.
A mechanism. Not a person, but a part, like a cog.
Right. And there are some real aha moments in this text that we need to unpack. There's this paradox of freedom in society versus absolute tyranny inside the workplace.
We're definitely going to have to dig into that one.
And then there's the argument that industrial efficiency actually requires the intellectual desolation of the worker.
That part really stuck with me. The idea that to make the factory work better, you have to make the worker, duller.
Yeah.
You have to literally subtract something from the human to add something to the bottom line. It's chilling.
And we'll see that even the so-called father of capitalism, Adam Smith, he admitted this. He flat out admitted that the system makes people stupid.
That is a hook if I ever heard one. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine for a second. Imagine a world where being smart or creative or having a whole world of productive drives, as Marx puts it, is actually a liability to your job.
A disadvantage.
A huge disadvantage. Imagine a world where your body is treated like a machine part that can be totally, and I mean totally, disconnected from your brain.
Marx uses some incredibly vivid language to describe this. He talks about the worker becoming a crippled monstrosity. He calls it industrial pathology. He even quotes a diplomat from the time who calls it the assassination of a people.
Okay, so let's get into it. This is the deep dive on the division of labor.
Let's start with the landscape. Section 1 of our source material is really a tale of two worlds. Marx draws a very sharp, very crucial line between the division of labor in society and the division of labor in manufacture.
Okay, let's unpack this distinction. Because on the surface, they sound like the same thing, right? People doing different jobs. I bake the bread, you fix the shoes, someone else grows the wheat. That's division of labor.
They do sound similar, and that's where the confusion often lies, and I think that's sort of the point. The division of labor in society is the big picture. It's the splitting up of the economy into broad, agriculture industry, and then into specific trades.
Yeah.
So you have a cattle breeder, a tanner, a shoemaker, all separate trades.
Right. The cattle breeder raises the cow, the tanner turns the hide into leather, the shoemaker turns the leather into a boot, a logical chain.
Exactly. And Marx points out that this division originates from natural differences, different communities finding different means of production in their environment. It can come from physiological differences, age, sex. But here is the absolute key.
Okay.
It's bound together by the exchange of commodities.
Commodities meaning?
Products. The tanner makes leather, which is a product, a commodity. He sells it to the shoemaker. The shoemaker makes a boot, another commodity. They are independent producers.
They own their own work.
Yes, they rely on each other, sure, but they are autonomous agents in a market. They meet as equals, as commodity owners.
Okay, so that's the social division, people trading things they made. What is the manufacturing division?
This is the splitting of tasks within a single workshop, under one roof, under one capitalist. And this is the key difference. In the workshop, the individual worker is not producing a commodity.
Wait, explain that. If I'm working in a pin factory, aren't I making pins?
No, you're not. You're making the head of the pin, or you're drawing the wire, or you're sharpening the point. Marx says the specialized worker produces no commodity.
I see what you're saying.
A spring maker in a watch factory cannot go out and sell a spring to a consumer. Who buys a spring? Nobody. They buy a watch. The spring has no use value on its own. It only works as part of the whole. Only the common product of all the specialized workers, the watch, becomes a commodity.
So in the social division, I make a boot and I sell it. I have power because I have a product. In the manufacturing division, I make a heel and I can't do anything with it.
You can't sell it. Your labor power only has value when it's sold to the one capitalist who owns the workshop. You're all bound together not by the exchange of your products, but by the sale of your labor to one boss.
You're stripped of your independence.
Completely. You literally cannot survive on your own skill anymore because your skill is too narrow too. Partial.
And this leads us to that irony regarding authority that you mentioned earlier, the despotism paradox. This was fascinating to me because it exposes such a raw double standard.
This is one of Marx's most biting critiques in this chapter. It's so sharp. He contrasts the anarchy of society with the despotism of the workshop.
Anarchy and despotism, those are strong words. How does he apply them?
Well, look at society at large, the social division of labor. Marx says it is ruled by anarchy.
Anarchy, meaning chaos.
Not exactly chaos, but the absence of a central plan. There is no single planner telling the shoemaker how many boots to make or what price to sell them at. Independent producers compete. Chance and caprice rule the market. It's a war of all against all, to use the phrase he borrows from Hobbes.
So outside the factory gates, it's the Wild West. It's the free market, no government interference, everyone doing their own thing, sink or swim based on your own merits.
Precisely. That's the ideal, anyway. But step inside the workshop, and the rules flip completely.
The world turns upside down.
Totally. Inside, it is ruled by despotism. The capitalist has undisputed authority. There's a rigid, iron law of proportionality. You must do this specific task at this specific speed in this specific way. The worker is a cog in a mechanism owned and operated by someone else. There is no democracy in the factory.
The plan is absolute. The authority is absolute.
The authority of the capitalist is, as Marx puts it, like that of a general on a battlefield.
So the irony is...
The irony is the hypocrisy. It's a staggering hypocrisy. Marx highlights that the bourgeois consciousness, the mindset of the factory owners, celebrates the freedom of the market. They praise the anarchy. They denounce any attempt by society to regulate production.
Right. If the government tries to step in and say, hey, maybe organize labor this way, or maybe we should have safety standards.
They scream that it's an attack on property and freedom. They call it slavery to the state. They say it violates the eternal rights of man.
But then they turn around and enforce that exact same rigid, military-like organization on their own workers, inside their own four walls.
Exactly. They demand anarchy in the market to preserve their freedom as capitalists, but they demand despotism in the factory to preserve their profit. They want no plan for society, but an infallible plan for the workshop.
Wow.
Marx quotes the source material saying that these apologists for the factory system have nothing more damning to say against any proposal for social organization than that it would turn the whole of society into a factory.
Wow. So they acknowledge that a factory is a terrible place to be, effectively.
Yeah, right.
They're admitting it's a tyranny.
They're admitting it. Their ultimate insult for social planning is to compare it to their own creation.
Don't make society like a factory. That'd be horrible. But get back to work in my factory, where I am the tyrant.
That is the core contradiction. They want to be little kings in their own domains while preaching liberty in the streets. And to understand how we got here, how this became possible, Marx takes us back to the guilds. This is the historical contrast.
The pre-capitalist era, the Middle Ages, the craftsmen.
Yes. And it's not just a quaint historical aside. Marx explains that the guilds deliberately and actively hindered this capitalist transformation. They saw it coming, and they put up walls.
Wow, so what did they do?
They had strict limits. A guild master could only employ a very small number of journeymen and apprentices, sometimes just one or two.
Why limit it? If you're a good master, Why not take on more apprentices?
To prevent the master from becoming a capitalist, it's that simple. If you only have 2 apprentices, you still have to work alongside them. You are still a master craftsman. Your identity is your skill.
You're in the trenches with them.
Exactly. But if you have 50 apprentices, you stop working. You stop being a craftsman and you just manage. You become a capitalist, an owner. The guilds blocked that transformation. They also prevented merchants from just buying labor as a commodity.
What does that mean?
A merchant could buy the table you made, he could buy your commodity, but he couldn't buy you for a week to make tables for him in his shed. Your labor power was not for sale in that way.
I love the metaphor Marx uses here. He says in the guild system, the worker and his means of production, his tools, his workshop, were united like the snail with its shell.
It's a beautiful image, isn't it? You carry your trade with you, you own your skill, and you own your tools. You are self-contained, you're a whole unit.
But manufacturer steps on the snail.
It breaks the shell, it rips the worker away from his tools and his autonomy. It separates the worker from the means of production. And Marx's point is that this division of labor in the workshop isn't just a natural evolution of making things faster, it is a specific artificial creation of the capitalist mode of production. Its purpose is to ensure the worker is dependent.
So it's not just about efficiency. It's about control.
Precisely. It's about creating a workforce that cannot walk away,
No.
a workforce that has no other option but to sell its labor.
And that dependency brings us to the emotional core of this deep dive, the real human cost, Section 2, the crippling of the worker. And we are using the word crippling because that is the word Marx uses. It's not our interpretation.
He does. He's very direct. He argues that manufacture converts the worker into a crippled monstrosity.
That is visceral language.
It is meant to be. He's trying to shock the reader out of just seeing this as an economic chart. He uses the analogy of a forcing house, like a greenhouse.
A greenhouse for people.
In a way, yes. In a greenhouse, you might force a plant to grow a massive, spectacular flower by systematically suppressing all its other features. You cut off the leaves, you starve the roots, you just channel everything into that one blossom. You get this one exaggerated feature, but the plant itself is distorted, unhealthy.
It's not a natural plant anymore.
Not at all. And Marx says manufacture does the exact same thing to a human being. It forces the worker's skill in one tiny detail, one repetitive, mindless motion while suppressing a whole world of productive drives and inclinations.
You become a master of, what, twisting a wire.
Yeah.
Or polishing a lens. But you lose the ability to do anything else. You lose your human wholeness.
You lose the ability to be a complete human producer. You lose your versatility, your creativity, your judgment. And he has this haunting comparison in the text to the butchery in the states of La Plata.
I remember this part. It was really stark.
Yeah.
He talks about butchering a whole beast just to get the hide or the tallow.
Right. In that region, cattle were so plentiful that they would kill an entire healthy cow just for the skin and the fat and leave the hundreds of pounds of meat to rot on the plains.
An incredible waste.
A monumental waste. And Marx says we are doing the exact same thing to the human. We are butchering a whole human being. Their mind, their creativity, their versatility, their potential, just to extract one repetitive motion. We are using the whole person to get just a tiny detail.
It's the fragment of a man.
Yes, and because of this fragmentation, this deliberate crippling, the worker is no longer an independent producer. They become, as he puts it, unfitted by nature to make anything independently.
What does that mean, unfitted by nature?
It means that after years of this, it's not just that you don't have the tools. You don't have the mental or physical capacity anymore. If you spend 20 years only making the spring of a watch and then you're fired, you cannot go home and start making watches. You can't even make a spring that anyone would buy because you don't have the other 149 parts of the watch.
You are totally dependent on the factory system. Your skill is worthless outside of it.
You are an accessory to the workshop. That's his phrase. You're like a special screwdriver that only works on one screw. And to illustrate this, Marx references the famous Roman fable of Menenius Agrippa.
Ah, the one about the stomach.
Exactly.
Sure.
The patricians, the rich, told the plebeians, the workers, that the state is like a body. The stomach, which is the rich, consumes all the food, but it digests it and sends nourishment to the limbs, the workers. So the limbs shouldn't complain about the stomach doing nothing but eating.
It's a justification for inequality.
A classic one. But Marx inverts this completely. He says in manufacture, the worker is reduced to a mere fragment of his own body. He's not a limb anymore. He is just a hand, or just a foot, or just an eye, detached and specialized. He is no longer a whole person who happens to work with his hands.
And this branding implies ownership.
That's the final brutal point. Marx says that just as the chosen people in the Bible bore the mark of Jehovah, the division of labor brands the manufacturing worker as the property of capital.
You are stamped.
You are stamped by your inability to exist outside the system. Your specialized skill is both your function and your prison.
This moves us from the physical to the mind. Because it's not just about physical repetition. It's what this process does to the brain, to the intellect, which is section 3, the intellectual severing.
The intellectual desolation, as he calls it. This is where the critique gets really psychological. In the old handicraft system, a worker used what Marx lists as knowledge, judgment, and will.
Let's pause on those 3. Knowledge, judgment, and will. That's a powerful trio.
It is. Think about it. If you're making a cabinet from scratch, you have to choose the right wood, understand its grain. That's knowledge.
Right.
You have to plan the design, measure the cuts, adjust on the fly if something goes wrong. That's judgment.
Okay.
And you have to drive the project from a pile of raw material to a finished, beautiful product. That's will. That's intention. You are thinking the entire time.
Hand and head are working together. The mind is engaged.
Exactly. But in manufacture, these faculties are systematically stripped from the individual worker. They don't disappear. They are concentrated in capital.
What do you mean concentrated in capital?
The science of production, the overall plan, the engineering, the logic, the efficiency calculations, all of that now belongs to the workshop as a whole, which is to say it belongs to the owner. The intellectual labor is separated from the manual labor.
It's the great divorce. The head is in the office. The hands are on the floor. The thinkers are separate from the doers.
And Marx says the intellectual potential of the process confronts the worker as a power which rules over him. It's an alien intelligence. The machine or the system knows more than you do. You are just servicing it. The process is smart, so the worker can be, well, stupid.
There are some shocking quotes in the source material from the thinkers of that time that really back this up. I mean, they weren't even hiding it. It's not like Marx is digging up some obscure pamphlet. These were mainstream thinkers.
No, they were quite proud of it. It was seen as a law of nature. Take Adam Ferguson, who was actually Adam Smith's teacher. He said, and this is a direct quote, "Ignorance is the mother of industry."
Ignorance is the mother of industry. Just let that sink in. That is brutally honest.
It is. He argued that manufacturers prosper most where the mind is least consulted. If you're thinking, you aren't working fast enough. Reflection leads to error. It leads to hesitation. Habit-mindless, automatic habit is what's truly efficient.
Get the mind out of the way so the body can work like a machine.
That's the goal. And the source mentions that in the 18th century, some manufacturers actually preferred hiring what they called semi-idiots for certain simple operations.
They actually use that term.
Yes, because if the operation was simple but the trade secret was valuable, they preferred workers who were mentally incapable of understanding the whole process.
Why?
That way, they couldn't steal the secret, they were less likely to figure out what they were actually making or how all the pieces fit together. Their lack of intellect was a feature, not a bug.
It's a form of security through enforced ignorance.
Exactly. And this is what leads Marx to start talking about industrial pathology.
He's medicalizing the problem.
He is. He's saying this isn't an economic model, it's a disease spreading through society. He quotes a contemporary diplomat, D. Urquhart, who says, "To subdivide a man is to execute him. The subdivision of labor is the assassination of a people."
Assassination. Not an accident, but a deliberate killing off of human potential.
It's not just an economic change, it's a crime against the human spirit. A slow, systematic execution of what makes us human.
This brings us to the big names. We've mentioned Adam Smith a few times. He's usually held up as the hero of free markets, the guy who wrote about the pin factory and how wonderfully efficient the division of labor is. But Section 4 of our deep dive reveals a side of Smith I don't think many people talk about.
It's the side of Smith that Marx actually respects, even while he critiques him. Because Smith, unlike many of his followers, was honest. He was painfully aware of the consequences.
He saw the downside.
He saw it clearly. In The Wealth of Nations, right there in his most famous work, Smith admits, quite darkly, that by performing a few simple operations his whole life, the worker becomes as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become.
That is a direct quote from Adam Smith, the champion of the free market.
A direct quote. He says the torpor of his mind renders him incapable of rational conversation, of forming any just judgment, or of having any generous, noble, or tender sentiment.
So Smith is saying the system destroys your intellect? your ability to socialize, and your empathy.
He goes on. He says this dexterity at his specific trade is acquired at the expense of his intellectual, social, and martial virtues. He says the uniformity of the stationary life corrupts the courage of his mind and makes him unfit to be a soldier.
So Smith sees the trade-off. We get cheaper pins, but we get stupider, weaker, less empathetic humans.
Yes. He lays it all out. And his solution is really interesting.
What does he propose?
He recommends state education. He says the government must step in and educate the common people to prevent this complete deterioration. But, and this is a key point Marx latches onto, Smith recommends this only in prudently homeopathic doses.
Homeopathic doses, like tiny amounts.
Just a little bit of education.
Just enough to keep them functioning, but not enough to, what, start getting ideas.
Exactly. Not enough to disrupt the system that requires their ignorance in the first place. And this is where we meet Garnier. Garnier was Smith's French translator and commentator. And Garnier reads Smith's suggestion about education and basically says, absolutely not. This is a terrible idea.
Garnier disagrees with the master. On what grounds?
He argues that education violates the first law of the division of labor. His logic is cold but brutally consistent. He says if you educate the workers, you ruin the system.
Wow.
He equates society with capital. He says the division between hand labor and head labor is the very foundation of society, of progress. And if you try to blend them back together by educating the hand workers, you're fighting against nature. You're attacking the natural course of things.
So for Garnier, keeping the worker ignorant isn't an unfortunate side effect. It's a necessary design feature of a functioning society.
It is the design feature. He asks, and this is his own question, ought the government to work in opposition to this division of labor? For him, the answer is a resounding no. To do so would be to proscribe labor, to condemn society to poverty.
It's interesting to compare this to the ancient views. Marx brings up Plato and Xenophon. How did they see the division of labor?
It's a fascinating contrast because on the surface they sound similar. The ancients, like Plato and his Republic, praised the division of labor. But, and this is the whole point, they praised it for a completely different reason.
They cared about use value. They cared about the quality of the thing being made.
I'm not sure I follow.
Their logic was, if a man only ever makes shoes, he will become an expert and make excellent shoes. It was about the quality of the product. The goal was a better boot, a sharper sword, a more beautiful pot.
Right. The craftsman strives for perfection in his craft.
But the modern political economy, the capitalist view that Smith and Garnier represent, doesn't fundamentally care about the quality of the shoe per se. It cares about the exchange value. It cares about cheapening the commodity to produce more of them faster.
So it's quantity over quality.
It's about accelerating the accumulation of capital. The ancients wanted a better product. The moderns want a cheaper worker and a faster profit. It's a total inversion of the goal.
Which brings us to the why. Why design a system that cripples people? It seems so malevolent. Section 5. The capitalist character of this whole system. We have to clarify the economic motive, because Marx isn't just making a moral argument. He's making an economic one. It's not just about organization or a desire to be cruel. It is a specific historical method of creating what he calls relative surplus value.
Okay, break that down for us. Relative surplus value.
So surplus value is basically the profit the capitalist extracts from the worker's labor. It's the value the worker produces above and beyond the cost of their own wages.
The unpaid labor.
Right. Now, you can increase that by making the workday longer. That's absolute surplus value. But there are limits to that. People need to sleep. So the other way is relative surplus value. You make labor more productive. You cheapen the commodities that workers need to survive. Food, clothing, housing.
And if their cost of living goes down?
Their wages can go down, or at least the value of their wages can be reduced. By making the whole system more efficient, you reduce the portion of the workday it takes to cover the worker's own costs, and the rest of the day, the surplus, is pure profit for the owner.
So, by crippling the workers' versatility, by making them a specialized cog, you make them cheaper and faster, which juices the whole system of profit creation.
And there's another, more subtle layer. Marx says that the social productive power of labor, the incredible force that's unleashed when 10 men work together in a coordinated way.
Right, the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. That social power starts to look like the productive power of capital.
So,
Since the individual workers are just fragments and the capitalist is the one who owns the workshop, brings them together, and holds the master plan, it looks like the capitalist is the one creating all this extra value. The owner's genius for organization gets all the credit for the collective power of the workers he's assembled.
Look at this amazing factory I built. Look how much it produces, ignoring the fact that it's the collective coordinated labor doing the heavy lifting.
Precisely. The worker becomes individually poorer in skill so that capital, as a whole, can become collectively richer in productivity. The workers are impoverished of their powers so the capitalists can be enriched by them.
But, and here is the twist that I found so interesting, the system wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
We tend to think of the Industrial Revolution as this unstoppable steamroller, but the source material mentions insubordination. The human element fought back.
This is a crucial point, and it sets up the next stage of history. Manufacture, as a system, had a fatal flaw from the capitalist perspective.
And that was?
It still relied on skill. Even if it was a narrow, specialized skill, it was still a human manual skill. The pin grinder had to be good at grinding pins. The spring maker had to be good at making springs. The foundation was still handicraft.
And if you have a skill, no matter how narrow, you have leverage.
Correct. Marx notes that because the mechanism of production had no objective framework independent of the workers, it wasn't fully automated yet, capital was in a constant struggle with the workers. He quotes Andrew Ur, another economist, who complains bitterly about the infirmity of human nature.
Infirmity of human nature, meaning they wouldn't just shut up and do what they were told.
Exactly. Ur writes that the more skillful the workman, the more self-willed and intractable he is, and the less fit a component of a mechanical system.
So the best workers were the biggest pains in the neck for the owners.
Yes. Skilled workers were stubborn, they knew their value, they couldn't be fully controlled like machines, they would dictate terms, they would slow down, they would go on strike. The whole system was still dependent on their subjective skill and their moods.
So the capital has a problem. He has created this incredibly detailed division of labor, but he still needs these pesky, willful human beings to execute it.
And because of this, Marx says, capital failed to seize the whole disposable labor time for the manufacturing workers. The handicraftsman was still the regulating principle of social production. As long as the human hand was the primary tool, the human brain was a potential source of resistance.
So what's the solution? If you can't break the will of the worker,
You make him obsolete, you replace him.
the rise of the machine.
The rise of the machine. This is how the chapter concludes, and it perfectly sets up the transition to the next phase, to modern industry. Marx points out that manufacture itself created the very tools that would destroy it. The workshop system, with its division of labor, created a class of highly skilled workers who made the instruments of labor. And eventually, this workshop produced machines.
The system builds its own gravedigger.
In a way. And the machine changes everything. It's the final act.
How does it complete the process?
The machine abolishes the role of the handicraftsman as the regulating principle. A machine doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't have insubordination. It doesn't get tired. It sets the pace. The technical reason for the lifelong attachment of the worker to a partial function is swept away.
And the barriers to capital's complete domination fall.
Completely. The only way to solve the problem of the skilled, stubborn, self-willed worker was to invent a mechanism that made his skill, and therefore his will, irrelevant. The machine is the final victory of the despotism of the workshop over the anarchy of human nature.
It's a chilling evolution when you lay it out like that. We started with the snail and the shell, the independent worker, whole and complete. We smashed the shell to create the dependent, specialized detail worker. But even that worker was too human, too stubborn.
Still too much of a person.
So we built a machine to replace the human element entirely, to create a system that didn't need our skill or our consent.
And in doing so, we completed the autopsy. We moved from the organic unity of the craftsman to the mechanical domination of the automaton. The workshop becomes a true monster, with the workers as its conscious organs.
So what does this all mean? Let's try to wrap this up. We've traveled from the separation of society in the workshop, through the mental and physical mutilation of the worker, past the hypocrisies of the classical economists, and right up to the doorstep of the modern machine age.
I think the main takeaway, the thing Marx really wants you to feel, is that the wealth of nations, that explosion of productivity we associate with capitalism, was built, according to him, on the impoverishment of the human.
It wasn't a win-win situation.
No. It was a trade-off where the human being paid the price in their own intellectual and physical wholeness. To make the collective worker of the workshop rich in productive power, the individual worker had to be made poor in every other way.
It's the idea that the system became smart by making the people stupid.
Ignorance is the mother of industry. It's a haunting phrase that just echoes through the whole analysis.
It really is. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over. We've been talking about this in the context of the 19th century, watchmakers, pin factories, blacksmiths. It can feel very historical, very distant. But think about today.
Think about the division of labor in the information age, in the digital factory.
Exactly. Marx argued that the manufacturing system turned humans into fragments and monstrosities because they couldn't see the whole process. They were just data points in a machine they didn't understand or control. When we look at the modern workplace, think about gig economy jobs, Amazon fulfillment centers, data entry farms, or even training AI models where your entire job is just clicking yes or no on thousands of images.
Yeah.
Are we still living in that industrial pathology?
Are we still fragments, just in a different kind of workshop?
When your work is reduced to a task delivered to you by an algorithm, and you complete it without knowing its purpose or seeing the final product, are you the master of your tool, or are you just a detail mechanism in a massive, invisible digital factory?
That is the question. Has the shell just been replaced by a screen?
Something to think about the next time you clock in or log on. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.